Hi everybody, it is December 1914 on the Eastern Front. This is where we're going to start this time because I happen to be on this side of the board. So, the Germans sent over no reinforcements this turn to the Eastern Front. They're just going to deal with what they have to take care of the Russians. And they had their troop that was here that was demoralized. He just fell back to here to get out of that evil zone of control of the Russians. So they did nothing over here. You know, they were both in forts, so they're not going to dig in. Okay, the big offensive happened right here. This is Warsaw. Warsaw is now in the hands of the Germans, which is probably a moot point. There was some good casualties. It was a major exchange. The Germans lost a bunch of troops taking care of it by taking Warsaw. So now they have Warsaw, but there's a bunch of troops that are now frozen in the tundra right there. The Austrians moved up, consolidated their line right here, trying to maybe thinking about a winter offensive. At the moment, they're not doing anything. They're just trying to rebuild their forces that they had died over the course of the war. So right now they need to spend time rebuilding their army. There's a lot of big pile of dead Austrians sitting over there, so they can't really do much, because if they start losing some troops, their front will disintegrate pretty good. So they're not in the mood for attacking right now. Now let's just wander over here to the other side of the world. The Italians. Italians, well, they didn't do anything. It's winter, so your movement is halved. So all they did was advance. All they could do is advance right here. They can't get to here because it costs you 2 movement points to get into an enemy zone of controls. They only have 2 movements, so they used what they did have to get to here. So that's the full extent of the Italian offensive. Nothing, really, other than taking a little bit of French terrain. Now, here's the big offensive that happened on this side of the board. We'll get rid of that glare real quick. All right, so what we have here, there was the fort, I think that's Belfort. Yeah, was in the French hands. There was a big attack that happened here, and it was really good die rolls. And the end result was, I think I rolled a 9 and a 10 or something like that, and just eliminated the enemy troops. There was an offensive right here. There was some French units there, but it was an exchange, and the Germans did not want to advance because they couldn't advance. Well, they didn't want to advance because, you know, they took some casualties in that attack and didn't feel like advancing, leaving a flank open. So they're just going to hang tight where they're at. There was an attack right here that took out the French right there, and they decided not to advance because they have a major city they have to park in, and they don't want to degrade their forces by leaving. And they could have gone in there, but that would have left open, I think that's Verdun right there, and they didn't want to leave that. So they did not advance. They killed the units, but they did not advance. They couldn't really afford to. The big offensive happened here on the corner salient. They did a massive attack right here with 3 army groups and just obliterated the French unit that was sitting there, and they advanced to here. And then they looked over here at these attacks, and basically the best they can do is get a 2-to-1 and a bunch of 1-to-1 attacks. They looked at these Englishmen sitting here on the corner, and they're like, well, that's too much of a tough nut to crack there, so they just hung tight, and all they did was advance. And it is a kind of a slow go right now. The offensive due to winter has kind of ground to a halt on the Western Front. But maybe spring will say something different. So that's the winter is helping the French to some extent. They did take a bunch of casualties, though, and that doesn't help them. And the Germans, they took some casualty too. So here's we got to look at the death count right here. Bunch of some dead Germans, dead Austrians, and a massive pile of Frenchmen and Russians. So yeah, it's not so great in the extent, but the Germans are kind of spread out a little bit right now. They're concentrating their attacks in localized areas. So that is the extent of the Central Power turn in December. And the Kaiser wanted Paris as a Christmas present for Christmas. All he got was Warsaw. All right, we'll be back. Hi everybody, it's the Allied powers' turn on the Eastern Front, and things are a little bit different. The Russians enjoy the winter, and that's when they always seem to go on the offensive. All right, over here, there was a fort right there. The Russians attacked it and pretty much got an exchange out of the deal. They took the fort, overran it, and now they're trying to encircle Königsberg. They're doing a good job of it right now. It's not looking so good. So the Germans' decision not to reinforce the Eastern Front so they could throw more troops into the Western Front is not quite paying off for them right now. So they're kind of suffering for it. Over here, the Russians dug in. They looked across the border and was like, we're just going to hold the center. That's their job, is hold the center here. We'll do the offensive over here in Prussia. And maybe we can force some pressure to pull troops off the Western Front and maybe help the French out. Let's see. This is what the Russians are trying to do. They're trying to help their French allies out. Now over here, the Russians also attacked Austrian units. They took out an army group. It used to be right there, if you remember, right? It's now gone. They took it out. But there was kind of an exchange in the deal. But they are pushing on the Austrians again. So it's the Austrians cannot afford to rebuild all these troops that they're losing. So there's a lot of pressure on the Austrians right now. They're getting ground down by the Russians. The Germans' decision not to reinforce the Eastern Front because it's wintertime, they don't think anything's going to happen, was a wrong decision. And it's not looking so good for them right now. But we'll see what's looking at the Western Front. All right, so as you can see, things are a little different here. They pulled some troops out because they needed them up in the upper area. These guys, I need to put some dug in, really entrenched. So they are entrenched here. There we go. Those are entrenched. They realized that with the circumstances, they built some troops and used their cheapest troops that they could buy to reinforce their line. They rebuilt another line back here. Being in its winter, the Germans cannot advance very far. So they're hoping that it'll give them time, a breather, to fall back, regroup, and see what they can do. The British, where they dug in. The units are still dug in here. So the northern sector looks like we're going to have some breathing space for the French for at least a couple months, possibly. Paris is pretty safe at the moment. They lost a couple major cities and some small cities on the German frontier, but they're trying to regroup themselves and see what they can do. Obviously, they think they can handle the French with a few minor corps. Just a small army group should be enough to stop the Italians from doing anything to them. So that is the entire turn right now. And let's just roll for weather for a second here. 5. I think this is still going to be snow. Alright. We got December 5. Oh, it's mud and snow. So it's muddy, so slow going on the western front and snow on the eastern front. If we rolled a 6, it would have been winter on both sides. That would have been to the French advantage. Not good at all. So that 5 that we rolled is not helping. All right, we'll be back January.